Hello everyone and welcome to Biology Simplified. Today this is part 2 video of reproduction, which is the first unit in class 12th biology, and we will be discussing about asexual reproduction in detail. If you haven't watched the part 1 of this video, please watch the introductory video and you can also continue with this video further. Okay? If you haven't subscribed our channel, please subscribe our channel and press the bell icon so that you can get regular updates about the upcoming videos. Talking about the types of asexual reproduction. So let us discuss what are the different types of asexual reproduction. We have the following types in asexual reproduction. We have the first, which is fission, fragmentation, budding, regeneration, spore formation, and vegetative propagation. So these are the different types of asexual reproduction which is seen in different organisms. Now let us talk about each one of them in detail. Asexual reproduction, as we discussed in the last video also, single parent is capable of producing offspring. Single parent is giving rise to the new offsprings, and as a result, offsprings that are produced, they are identical. Okay, they're not just identical, but they are the exact copies of their parents. Fine. So the offsprings which are produced as a result of asexual reproduction, they are the exact copies. Exact matlab they are just similar, or they are just identical to their parents. So they are the exact copies of their parents. Okay, and what do we call these exact copies as? The term is clone. Okay, so these offsprings are therefore called as the clone. The term clone is therefore used to describe an individual which is morphologically and genetically similar individuals. Okay, so morphologically in appearance they would be same, and also genetically they would be identical. Fine. So such like individuals are defined as the clone. Okay, and these are produced in the asexual reproduction. In protistans and in monerans. So protistans and monerans, the organisms or the parent cell divide by mitosis into two to give rise to the new individuals. So protistans are going to divide, the parent cell is going to divide, and two identical daughter cells are going to be produced, and this is happening by the mitosis. Okay, so mitotic cell division happens here, and therefore it is also resulting in the similar identical daughter cells in this case. Okay, so these organisms, cell division itself is the mode of reproduction. So mitosis we have read as a mode of cell division, but the organisms which are performing asexual reproduction, in these organisms mitosis is the mode of reproduction only. Okay, so we can write that cell division itself is the mode of reproduction in these organisms. Okay, next is one more example here, which is binary fission in amoeba. So amoeba is reproducing by binary fission. Okay, so this is the parent cell in amoeba. Parent cell here, the nucleus and the cytoplasm present, and this is the pseudopodia outside. Now here what happens? First the karyokinesis will happen, which is followed by the cytokinesis. Okay, so first the nucleus is going to divide, which we call as karyokinesis, and this is followed by cytokinesis, which is the division of cytoplasm. Fine. So binary fission, one parent cell is giving rise to two daughter cells here, and therefore binary fission it is called as. So this is one parent cell which is giving rise to the two daughter cells. Okay, and example is amoeba. All right, so this is also one of the asexual mode of reproduction. Now next is many single-celled organisms reproduce by binary fission. So many of the organisms which are single-celled or which are unicellular, they are reproducing by binary fission. and the cell divides into two equal halves, and then they rapidly grow into the adult individual. So one example we have seen as amoeba, and the other example is this paramecium. Paramecium also divides by binary fission. Okay, so this is also an asexual mode of reproduction in paramecium. Fine. All right. Next is, how do yeast divide? So what happens in yeast? The division is unequal and small buds are produced. So what happens in yeast is, so for example, if this is the parent yeast, so a small bud-like extension will appear here. Okay? So this is what you call as the bud. So this bud is going to be produced, and this is going to be remain attached initially with the parent cell only, and then eventually this bud is going to be separating. Okay, so this is going to be developed further, and this then separates from the parent cell, and this now develops into the mature yeast cell. Fine, so this is how this process happens in yeast. And what does this process called as? You call this process as budding. Okay, so this is also an asexual mode of reproduction, budding, and it happens in yeast. All right, so this is how yeast divides. So one more diagram here to explain this. NCERT also mentions this diagram. This is the parent cell. So this is the bud which has developed, and once it develops, it is going to be detached from the parent. Fine. So this bud is going to be coming out, and this is going to survive as an individual organism. Okay, so this phenomenon is called as budding, and this is also a method of asexual reproduction in yeast. Next is, what happens in unfavorable conditions in amoeba? So organisms like amoeba in unfavorable conditions, they are withdrawing its pseudopodia, and they secrete a three-layered hard covering which is called as the cyst. Okay, so in such organism, when the conditions are not favorable, when the environmental conditions are not favorable for them, so what are they doing? They are withdrawing their pseudopodia. So this is the pseudopodia. Fine, they are withdrawing it, and instead of that, they form a hard covering around the entire outer surface, and this is called as the cyst. Okay, and what is this phenomenon called as? This phenomenon is called as encystation. Okay, so this is what is formation of cyst around the body is what you call as encystation, and this is very common in amoeba during the unfavorable conditions, when the environmental conditions are not favorable for them to survive. So this is how they protect themselves. Okay, and the phenomenon is called as encystation. Okay, remember this term, it is important, encystation. Next is, when the favorable conditions return. So under unfavorable conditions, they had produced a cyst around itself. So when they are back, the favorable conditions are again back, they are returning, and now this encysted amoeba divides by multiple fission and produces many minute amoebae called as pseudopodiospores. Okay, so now when the conditions are again favorable for the organism, then what happens? Inside only it has divided by multiple fission, and it is going to produce many minute amoebae which are called as pseudopodiospores. Okay, however, during the normal condition, we have studied that amoeba reproduces by binary fission, but when it is encysted and when the conditions changes back to the favorable again, so in that condition it is reproducing by multiple fission, and it is producing many minute amoebae which are called as pseudopodiospores. Now what happens further with these pseudopodiospores? The cell wall is going to burst, okay, and the spores are going to be liberated in the surrounding medium, and so many amoebae are going to be released out, and this process is what you call as sporulation. So for example, here so many amoebae are going to be released out, and this is what you call as sporulation. Okay, so this sporulation is a phenomenon when many of the amoebae are released out when the conditions are favorable again. So these amoebae are released out, and the process is called as sporulation. copulation. Okay. Now next is fragmentation. What is fragmentation? The body is breaking down into distinct pieces or fragments, and each fragment grows into an adult which is capable of producing the offspring, for example in Hydra, and also it is seen in Spirogyra. Okay. So here you can see in Spirogyra, this is the body which is broken down into smaller fragments here, and each of these fragments is capable of growing into the adult individual. Okay, so from one we got here three spirogyras. Okay, similarly it happens in Hydra as well. So the body is breaking down into smaller fragments. Fine, and these fragments are then growing further and they are capable of producing the offsprings, and this method is what you call as fragmentation. Next is regeneration. What happens in regeneration? The missing part of the organism is replaced by proliferation of cells. If any of the part is missing in the organism, so that is going to be replaced. Okay, there the proliferation of the cells is going to happen and that particular part is going to be replaced. Fine. So this is what you call as regeneration. So one more important question here is, what is the difference between fragmentation and regeneration? See, regeneration is just for some of the parts and it is only shown by some of the organisms. Okay, like for example, if a lizard loses its tail, then it has the capacity to regrow its tail back. Fine, but that doesn't happen with every part of the lizard. Okay, and that doesn't happen with any of the organisms. If an organism loses tail, any organism doesn't have the capacity to regrow again back its tail. Fine. So therefore regeneration is just some of the missing parts in some of the organisms are going to be replaced by the proliferation of the cells. But in fragmentation we studied that the fragments here, and the fragments are going to be developing into the new organism. So it is just any of the fragment is going to be developing into the new organism in this case. Okay, so fragmentation and regeneration both however are the modes of reproduction also. Next is spore formation. What happens in spore formation and what are the various spores? Zoospores, Cornidia and Gamuse. These are the main spores which are produced for the asexual reproduction. Let us see what zoospores are first. So when we talk about the zoospores, they are endogenously produced unicellular, naked and motile spores with one or two flagella. So endogenously matlab they are produced inside the body and they can have one or two flagella, either uniflagellate or biflagellate. Motile spores, they are motile because of the presence of flagella. Okay, and they are produced endogenously. And secondly, zoospores are produced in the structures which are called as zoosporangium. So there is a special structure which is called as zoosporangium, and in those structures only zoospores will be produced. Okay, so this was the first spores which are produced in asexual reproduction. Now next is Cornidia, the second type. Asexual spores, and they are non-motile. Remember, for zoospores we have read that they are motile spores, but for Cornidia they are the non-motile spores. Okay, they do not have flagella and therefore they are non-motile spores. They are cut off from the tip of the special hyphae and they are called as conidiophores. Okay, so now they are cutting out from the tip of the hyphae which is called as conidiophore के tip, hyphae के tip से cut हो जाते हैं and they are called as Cornidia. Okay. Lastly, we have Gamuse. And what are Gamuse? They are internal asexual reproductive units or bud which develop within the parent body and they are released during germination. So internally only these Gamuse are going to be formed. Okay, within internally only these buds are going to be developed, and once it is germinating, these are going to be released out. Okay, these Gamuse are going to be released out. Fine, so internal reproductive units or buds, therefore we call them. Okay, now next is vegetative propagation. This is the next mode of asexual reproduction, vegetative propagation. This is the mode of reproduction in which new plants are formed from the vegetative parts of the plants like roots, stem and leaves. So generally, the new plants are produced from the seeds, but in vegetative propagation, the new plants are formed from the roots, stem or leaves, which are not, they're not seeds, but they are the vegetative parts of the plant. So here the new plant parts or new organisms or new plants are going to be formed from the different mode. And what are these vegetative parts? These are the vegetative parts which are going to be producing the new plant. So roots will be planted and they will be giving rise to the new organism. The stem will be planted and it will be giving rise to the new plant. Similarly, the leaves can give rise to the new plant. Okay. So therefore, we say the vegetative parts of the plants are forming the new plants here in this case. Let us see some of the examples of vegetative propagation. Now, what are the examples of vegetative propagation? Let us see them. We have agave or bulbil, which is the first example. Bulbil is seen in agave. Then we have the bulbs, which are seen in onion and garlic. We have eyes, which are seen in potato. Leaf buds, which are seen in bryophyllum. Suckers, which are seen in mint. Then we have offset, which is seen in hyacinth and pistia. Rhizome, which is seen in ginger. And runners, which is seen in oxalis. So these are the different vegetative propagation modes in different plants, and we will continue in the next video wherein we will describe each of them in detail. Okay, so if you have liked the video, please subscribe the channel and press the bell icon. And if you have any doubts, please write in the comment section. Thank you.